The journey to the west is based on a true story of a Buddhist monk, Xuanzang, and his pilgrimage to India to acquire the true scriptures. Buddhism had entered China from India during the Han Dynasty, mainly as the religion of foreign merchants. It spread amongst the Chinese population after the fall of the Han, during the so-called period of division. Then the Sui collapsed in 618. Xuanzang fled to Chang'an, where the new Tang dynasty had been proclaimed. He moved on to Chengdu in remote Sichuan, where hundreds of monks had taken refuge. He later traveled throughout the country, learning from the local monks whatever he could about their understanding of Buddhism. He discovered they differed greatly amongst themselves, and came to realize the confusion and limitations on Chinese Buddhism due to a lack of authoritative, canonical texts. The Buddhist scriptures in China had been translated at different times and places, by translators of different levels of ability and understanding of Buddhist doctrines, even translations of translations through the various languages of India and Central Asia. Xuanzang could see that beyond the confusion there was great truth, but that truth could only be found in the original and genuine scriptures of Buddhism. That would entail going to India to get them. The monk Faxian had visited India between 399 and 414, and had left a record of his travels. Xuanzang was already aware of the various schools of Indian Buddhism, and was particularly interested in acquiring the Sanskrit text of the Yoga Sastra, which taught that the outside does not exist, but the inside does. All things are mental activities only. That was the basis of the consciousness-only school of Buddhism, founded in China by Xuanzang. Metaphysical and abstract, it did not become a popular school, but its influence persists. Xuanzang was 28 when he started on his pilgrimage to India. It was a pilgrimage with a purpose, altruistic and not personal, to bring the true scriptures to China for the salvation of lost souls. He spent 16 years away, traveling from what is now Xi'an through Gansu, and from there through the oasis cities around the Taklamakan Desert, into Central Asia, then through what is now Afghanistan to India. After his return to China he wrote a detailed geographical description of the lands he had passed through, with notes on the peoples, their languages and beliefs. This book is called Record of the Western Regions, in Chinese Cug. The Chinese title of the Monkey King's amazing adventures is Cug, a deliberate and direct reference to Xuanzang's records of his travels. In the early 20th century the Record of the Western Regions became a guidebook to many of the foreign devils on the Silk Road. Sir Aurel Stein was one of these, who convinced the curator of the secret library of Dunhuang that Xuanzang was his patron saint, thus persuading him to hand over large quantities of thousand-year-old manuscripts. Much in the way of Heinrich Schliemann with Homer in hand looking for Troy, Aurel Stein and the others relied on Xuanzang's Record of the Western Regions as a guide, located long-buried cities under the sands of the Taklamakan Desert. Xuanzang, incidentally, visited Dunhuang on his way back to Xi'an. In fact he had been provided with an escort from Khotan, on the emperor's orders. It is not known if the famous portrait in one of the caves is of Xuanzang, or another itinerant monk. On his way to India, he passed through many kingdoms. In Turfan the king wanted to retain him to such a degree that he would not allow him to proceed, and only agreed after Xuanzang went on a hunger strike. The king was so impressed he provided him with an escort and provisions for the next part of the journey. He also wrote 24 letters of introduction to his fellow rulers of the small kingdoms of Central Asia through which Xuanzang would pass. They proceeded to the oasis of Kucha, another stop along the Silk Road, where the red-haired, blue-eyed Tocharian ruler, a Buddhist, made him welcome. There he was able to debate with Hinayana Buddhists, who followed the lesser vehicle, road to enlightenment, which was regarded as inferior by adherents of the Mahayana, or greater vehicle, which was the prevalent form of Buddhism in China. Such debates were to continue during Xuanzang's travels, adding to his knowledge of the various schools of Buddhism within India itself. During the 7 days they spent crossing the Tian Shan Mountains, 14 men, almost half their party, starved or were frozen to death. They went on to the camp of Yehu, the Khan of the Eastern Turks, where the letters of introduction from the king of Turfan were helpful. This Khan also suggested that Xuanzang go no further, but eventually provided him with a Chinese-speaking guide, who accompanied him as far as modern Afghanistan. He passed through Bamiyan, where he described the huge statues carved into the cliff, the same statues which were blown up by the Taliban only a few years ago. He then went to Tashkent and Samarkand, then on to Bactria, near Persia. The local ruler was Tardu, the eldest son of Yehu and the brother-in-law of the king of Turfan. Tardu's wife had died, and he had married her younger sister, who immediately poisoned him. She and her lover then usurped the throne. It was here Xuanzang met Dharmasima, who had studied Buddhism in India, and later Prajnakara, a monk from an area near Kashmir. Xuanzang was coming more and more into the Indian cultural sphere, but he yet had to physically cross the Hindu Kush into India itself. When he crossed the Kabul River he was closer to places and events associated with the life of the Buddha. Buddhism was already in decline in India when Xuanzang visited, and many of the famous monasteries, once teeming with monks, were deserted and in ruins. He visited Sravasti, the site of the Great Hall where Buddha preached, Kapilavastu, where he was born, and Kusinagara, where he died and was cremated. In one of the most moving passages in the book, when Xuanzang first approaches the Bodhi tree, under which the Buddha had attained enlightenment, he threw himself face down and wept, wondering what sin he must have committed in a previous life to be born in Tang, China and not in India during the lifetime of the Buddha himself. For 8 or 9 days he could not bring himself to leave the holy tree, until some monks came from Nalanda monastery, India's most prestigious place of Buddhist learning, to escort him there. The entire community of 10,000 monks came to greet him. He traveled throughout India, to Bengal and Orissa, and almost to Ceylon, but political turmoil there made it imprudent to visit. At one stage he was captured by pirates intending to sacrifice him, but a cyclone swept through the forest and the pirates were so scared they released him. Towards the end of his time in India, Xuanzang met the great Buddhist King Harsha, and explained his mission. Soon after this Harsha sent a delegation to Chang'an, thus establishing what we would now call diplomatic relations with China. Indian monks also urged Xuanzang to stay with them. India was the home of the Buddha, and China was such an unenlightened place it would be unlikely to retain Buddhahood there. Xuanzang explained that was precisely the point of his mission, and he made plans to return to China. During all this time in India, throughout his travels, he had been collecting scriptures and statues. It was now time to pack 'em up and return to China. He made elaborate preparations, and set off through terrain as difficult and dangerous as the way there. When he was crossing the mile-wide Indus River, on an elephant, his books and statues were thrown into the water by a sudden storm, and several were lost. Xuanzang had to send back to India for replacements before proceeding. His party consisted of 7 monks, 20 porters, 10 asses, 4 horses, and an elephant. He eventually arrived in Kashgar, and then Khotan, which he noted was famous for its jade market. At this point his fame had grown to the extent that the Tang emperor instructed the king of Khotan to provide an escort for Xuanzang and his group to Dunhuang, and from there to Chang'an. A vast crowd welcomed him home. Emperor Tazong met him personally, and asked him to write a detailed geographical description of the 70 or more kingdoms through which he traveled. The record of the western regions was completed in 646. Until his death the pilgrim retranslated existing works, and translated previously unknown scriptures. He died not long after completing his translation of the long and complex Diamond Sutra. His best-known translation in the modern world is the Heart Sutra, recited daily by millions of believers, and readily available in any modern Chinatown shop selling Buddhist statues and other religious items. Increased interest in Buddhism, the Silk Road, and growing global awareness has made Xuanzang a significant figure in world history in the 21st century. Historically, he can also be considered an extremely influential figure. Through him Buddhism, which was to die out in India, was translated to China, and a collection of confused and disconnected ideas which Buddhism was threatening to become was transformed into a profound and complex philosophical and psychological system. From China Buddhism spread to Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Most of the philosophical schools of Tang Buddhism did not survive the fall of the Tang, one of the great watersheds in Chinese history. What did survive was the Pure Land school, which saw the aim of life as reincarnation in the Pure Land, where one could enjoy the blessings and avoid the sufferings of life on earth. This was to become the basis of popular Buddhism throughout China, and from there into the Chinese communities of Southeast Asia and beyond. The other school to survive was Chan, which did not rely on scriptures, but on meditation to reach enlightenment in a flash of inspiration. This was restricted to a few monasteries in China, particularly the Shaolin Monastery, which combined Chan Buddhism with martial arts. Recent interest in Chinese martial arts and innumerable movies about fighting monks have attracted a certain interest in Chan Buddhism itself in recent years. Historically it flourished in Japan under the name of Zen, and it was introduced to Western readers through the writings of Daisetsu Suzuki. The other schools are mainly of interest to historians and philosophers. The most popular and enduring book which has kept the memory of Xuanzang alive for more than a millennium has been one that would have amazed the real Xuanzang. He has become one of the major figures in a novel, translated into the languages of the modern world and modified according. The Record of the Western Regions and the Life of Xuanzang, a biography of Xuanzang written by a disciple, Hilly, were full of stories of strange kingdoms with even stranger customs, attacks from robbers and pirates, mountains, ravines, wild animals, and dangers of all types. Even demons and devils are mentioned. Stories about Xuanzang were told by itinerant storytellers in the marketplaces, mixed with various local folk tales and other traditions. Modified history was the stock in trade of the storytellers. Other famous stories deriving from the complex history of China during the Three Kingdoms, after the fall of the Han, or the adventures of a group of outlaws living on a mountain during the Song dynasty. Historical details were not important to the storytellers, but the stories were fleshed out with all sorts of fictional embellishments to attract the interest of the listener, or later the reader. Each round would end on a dramatic note, with the words, "If you want to know what happened next, you must listen to the next chapter." So the next chapter would start with a brief synopsis of the story so far, before continuing it. This is the origin of the episodic novel, the usual form of traditional Chinese novels. Demons, monsters, and barbarians of every type. The earliest written version of these stories about Xuanzang himself is the tale of the search for the true scriptures of Xuanzang of the Great Tang Dynasty, and dates from the Southern Song, but a fragment about the Tang Emperor going to hell was discovered in the Dunhuang Secret Library. In the Southern Song version the monkey is already Xuanzang's chief disciple, and their encounters involve gods, demons, and bizarre kingdoms. These stories, and others, continued to accrue and develop in various forms, mixed with local folklore and popular religion, and were collected and edited in their present form in the late Ming. The entire book is very long, and the plots and subplots, with their myriads of demons and other strange creatures, make very demanding reading. At much the same time abridgments were produced, about a quarter of the length of the original. During the King the book was usually read in abridged form, and one such edition formed the basis of the present translation. On one level the Monkey King's Amazing Adventures is an adventure story, and a very funny one. On another level it is an allegory in which the pilgrimage to India is a simile for the individual seeking enlightenment. On the first level, the monkey, the pig, the monk, and the sand spirit, and the innumerable demons and monsters, are characters in an adventure. On the second, they are personifications of our own inner spirits and demons, the pure, idealistic. Monk trying to achieve spiritual awareness, trying to keep the impetuous monkey, the lazy and lustful pig, and the mournful but reliable sand spirit under control, while all the time being confronted with internal and external demons which must be conquered to continue the way forward. One yet another level for the specialist. The book presents an extraordinary range of religious folklore, both Taoist and Buddhist. There is much discussion about how much of the book is Buddhist, how much Taoist, even how much, if any, Confucianism is in it. Xuanzang was a committed Buddhist, of course, but the general theme of the book seems to be San Jiao Wei Yi, the three religions are really one. Each deserves to be treated equally, which as far as the monkey is concerned, is to be treated with equal irreverence. Christian themes in the novel, an interpretation shared with no one else. Before the story proper begins, there is a long section which has nothing to do with the monk or his mission, but deals with the exploits of the stone monkey, who has learnt an amazing range of skills, including the 72 transformations and the secret of immortality, and who claims the title of Great Sage, the equal of heaven. His major characteristics are his cheekiness and guts, afraid of no one, irreverent towards everyone, including the Jade Emperor of the Taoists and even Buddha himself, whom he derides as a perfect fool, until he learns better. He causes havoc in heaven, and eventually the Jade Emperor calls on Buddha's help. He is then trapped under a mountain for 500 years. The introduction is followed by the story of how Guanyin, known throughout the Western world as the Goddess of Mercy, is instructed by Buddha himself to bring the scriptures to save lost souls to China, which in the novel is portrayed as being in desperate need of such guidance, reflecting, by the way, the attitude of the Indian monks to China in the record of Western regions. Guanyin gives this task to the monk Xuanzang, and provides him with 3 protectors, a monkey, a pig, and a sand spirit. Here we learn that the monk had a past life, in which he was the golden cicada, a favorite disciple of Buddha, who failed to pay attention during a sermon and was punished by being reincarnated in China. His disciples are not ordinary monkeys or pigs either. They had all formerly been spirits with official positions in the celestial palace of the Jade Emperor, but for various reasons offended their rulers and were sent to earth as punishment. Part human, part something else, they seek to regain their previous status, and agreed to help Xuanzang as an atonement for their sins. The monk undertakes this mission for a variety of reasons. One, of course, is to bring enlightenment to the lost souls of China. Another reason is also to fulfill a vow made by Emperor Tazong, who has seen hell and ransomed himself out on condition that he would establish a society for the salvation of lost souls. This provides a secular, as well as spiritual, justification for the trials for the journey. The last 3 chapters of the novel describe Xuanzang's entry into paradise and his return to earth to bring the holy scriptures to China, after which he attains Buddhahood. Between the introductory section and the final conclusion there are 86 chapters. In each of these, the pilgrims are confronted with various demons and monsters, fight with them, defeat them, and continue the journey. Many of the stories extend over several chapters. The geography of the record of Western regions is real, including modern Xinjiang, Afghanistan, and India. The geography of the novel is a series of kingdoms of barbarians with strange customs, suspicious temples, and monasteries where danger usually lurks, or mountains and ravines. Inhabited by demons who live on human flesh. These are usually anxious to eat Xuanzang himself, as his holiness would confer immortality. The demons, too, have previous lives. They're usually animal spirits in semi-human form. Apart from the demons, there are formidable physical trials, raging rivers, burning mountains, a kingdom ruled by Amazons, the land of spider spirits and so on. After a pilgrimage said to have taken 14 years, they arrive at the half-real, half-legendary destination of Vulture Peak, where Xuanzang meets Buddha, and explains his mission. Buddha is gracious but a bit condescending. He tells his assistants to provide the Chinese travelers with some sutras, but they cheat them, giving them blank sheets of paper. The last chapter describes the return journey to China, flying with celestial messengers, not on foot as in the real story, and a final trial, where they almost lose the scriptures in the fictionalized version of the crossing of the Indus. Here the elephant becomes a tortoise, and the river separating India from China becomes the demarcation line between the land of bliss in paradise and the land of unenlightened souls on earth. They stay on earth only for long enough to deliver the scriptures to the Tang Emperor, after which they return to paradise and the just rewards. The only characters who appear regularly throughout the book are the monk, the monkey and the pig. The horse, a former dragon who has also fallen from grace, is sometimes considered a fourth disciple but rarely appears. His job is less to defend the master than to carry him to India, and carry the scriptures back to China. The various demons they meet along the way are dealt with and usually not mentioned again, though there are occasionally some references to earlier adventures. There are also a number of supernatural actors of both Buddhist and Taoist persuasion who get involved in both celestial and earthly matters from time to time. These are, 1. The Jade Emperor, a Taoist deity. He lives in the celestial palace. He is served by a bureaucracy rather like an earthly one, but his ministers are various spirits, stars, and planets. 2. The Queen of Heaven, the queen of the female immortals. Another inhabitant of the celestial palace. Her garden contained the peach of immortality, which bloomed only once in 3,000 years. She could confer immortality on her guests at her peach banquets. 3. The Ancient of Days, an unusual and memorable name for the patriarch, a disciple of Buddha, but in the novel seems to be in the Taoist camp. A sort of advisor and ambassador at large. 4. The Minister of Venus and the Minister of Jupiter, personifications of the spirits of these planets. Their role is rather like the ministers in a Chinese traditional bureaucracy. 5. Yama, the King of Hell, Judge Kui, the Chief Judge of Hell, the 10 Judges of Hell, Guardian King Li and his sons Neza and Mucha, various messengers and other servants, other officials in the netherworld of folk religion where the doctrines and spirits of Buddhism and Taoism become very blurred. 6. The Buddha. In the novel he was many names: the incarnate model, the ideal, the Buddha to come, the cosmic Buddha, Maitreya, Tathagata, and many others. The historical Buddha was a real person, referred to in the novel as Shakyamuni. Buddha appears early in the novel to help the Taoist Jade Emperor suppress the monkey, and reminds him of his rather insignificant place in the grand scheme of things. When the monkey thinks he can jump as far as the end of the universe, he finds he has not left the palm of the Buddha. This is the theme of one of the most common bronze curios available in the flea markets of modern Beijing. Buddha appears from time to time, but mainly at the end of the novel, where he presents the true scriptures to the monk for the salvation of lost souls in the Middle Kingdom in the East. 7. Guanyin, the goddess of mercy. Her Chinese name means, she who hears the sounds of misery of the world. In some ways the architect of the whole enterprise, Guanyin seeks permission from Buddha to bring enlightenment to the people of the East, which coincides with the vow of the Chinese emperor to found a society for the salvation of lost souls. Whenever in trouble he cannot manage, the monkey appeals to Guanyin, who comes to the rescue. It is in Guanyin's interests that the mission succeeds, despite finding the tactics of the monkey and the others a bit distasteful from time to time. 8. Ananda and Kasyapa, the major disciples of the Buddha, presented in an unflattering light in this novel. They expect to be paid for the scriptures Xuanzang has sacrificed so much to obtain for the benefit of others, and when monkey threatens to make a fuss, give them scrolls of wordless sutras, plain paper. The pilgrims only discover this when they have left, and eventually Buddha's disciples supply them with written scriptures, on the grounds that their level of enlightenment was not enough to enable them to understand the wordless ones. 9. The Emperor Tazong. Apart from the monk, the only human and historically real character in the book. The second emperor of the Tang, he is widely considered the greatest emperor in Chinese history. When Xuanzang set off on his journey, there was a ban on all travel to the interior because of the general military chaos of the time, but when Xuanzang returned in 645, his fame had come before him, and he was warmly welcomed by Tazong, in both the novel and in historical fact. Incidentally, the big wild goose pagoda that we can now visit in Xi'an is not the pagoda built for Xuanzang, in which he translated the scriptures into Chinese. This was made of mud and clay, and decayed within 50 years. The present structure was rebuilt by Empress Wu. We have heard that the age of the world is 129,600 years for one kalpa, that these kalpas are divided into 12 periods, just as the day and night are divided into 12 Chinese hours, and each period is 10,800 years, or 2 half periods of 5,400 each. Speaking of the divisions in a day, there are 12 of 2 hours each, from midnight to midnight. But if we speak of the division of the kalpas, at the end of each there is a return to chaos and darkness. After the first period of 5,400 years, everything should be dark like night without any living thing. This state is called chaos. After the second period of 5,400 years comes the era which gradually begins to open up with light. Hence the saying, the winter solstice is the re-beginning. But nature never changes. Everything is dead. Soon after, life again begins. After a third period of 5,400 years, the lighter parts of matter rise up, forming the sun and moon and stars. Towards the end of a fourth period of 5,400 years, the solid parts combine. The Book of Changes says, "How great is heaven, how perfect is the earth producing all things." The earth henceforth becomes solid. After a fifth period of 5,400 years more, all the solids resolve into water and fire, into mountains, rocks, and earth. After a sixth period of 5,400 years, at the end of another kalpa, all things are reproduced again. Heavenly influences descend and earthly influences rise, and by the union of the two, all living things are produced. After the seventh period of 5,400 years, men and birds and beasts are produced. Thus we have the three great powers, heaven, earth, and man. The three emperors came forth to rule the earth and the 5 sovereigns fixed the social relations.